is Talk with John. Looking forward to being with you for the remainder, well, until about 6 o'clock. I'll be having a guest join me here in just a moment. But first, I want to, let's see if still working on getting things kind of organized here a little bit better, if that makes sense. As you can see, it's not the exact same setup that I've always had. In fact, my mic might be falling down any moment. So let me see if I can uh, make that a little more solid. I think I just did, hopefully. And so I am looking forward to being with you here today. And just checking a few things out. So, uh, yes, let's get started. Sorry about that, folks. The mic was starting to fall over, and I was like, "Ooh, I need to fix that." So, this is Talk with John, and I am your host, John. Kind of funny how that works. Here on Main Street Media, this is the show Talk with John, as you can see, and I'm looking forward to being with you for the next till 6. Like I said, about 6 o'clock. You can view us on our website, kmmu.org. You can go to there to see the shows that we've done, the many political head trauma, the Gowd crowd, and many others, as well as you can go to our when you go to KMMU, you have the option of clicking on X, you have the option of clicking on YouTube, and you have the option of clicking on Rumble. Any one of those three will also take you to many of our shows, and you can watch one of our shows. But here at about 4:30, I'm going to be having David Pine join me. But until then, there's a couple of stories that I will go over. But first, I want to give out my show prayer and show mantra. The show prayer is, I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra is, where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, let's get back to the show. So there's a number of things that I want to hit quickly. And one of those is, and I think I might even bring this up with David Pine, the Supreme Court is not going to review the outlandish 1.4 billion judgment against Alex Jones. In fact, I want to say that they tried to take that up to $8 trillion for his remarks with Sandy Hook. Now, what happened? Well, John, the jury of his peers found him guilty, right? And said, yeah, that evil dude with what he said, we need to go after him and take him down a peg. So we're going to sue him. I mean, we're not going to go after Adam Lanza, I believe, who is the murderer. No, we're going to go after Alex Jones because he, quote unquote, questioned the whether it was a hoax or not. Hey, there were a lot of people that were wondering that all over the place, and he just happened to be one of them. Bottom line is, free speech. Shouldn't you be able to have free speech? He didn't mention the families by name, and even if he did, it's still free speech. They go out, they're part of the public forum. They get out, they're known in the public forum. They become a public figure. And an FBI agent won that he was defamed or something, like his feel bads were hurting. So he got millions, tens of millions of dollars. Now, well, John, a jury of his peers found him guilty. That's what most people think. No, he didn't have a jury of peers find him guilty. Now, a jury did come up with a number after they were told that Alex Jones was guilty by the judge. So this is the biggest problem. He was never given a trial of his peers. He was just defaulted. Now it's been done to Mike Lindell. So the bottom line is what they're trying to do is tell the not mainstream media, anybody that is not part of the mainstream media, you better watch yourself, or else you have a chance that you're going to be owing billions of dollars. And like Alex Jones said, I've never had, I think he said he's never made more than like $40 million. And so he tried to settle with families out of court. His news organization has never made billions of dollars. The whole news organization might make several million, maybe even a couple hundred million, but that's just because a news organization doesn't mean he did. But the bottom line is, the biggest issue that everybody should be up in arms about is he was not given a jury trial by his peers. That's what people should have issues with. Next story. Now, normally I like to point out Democrats and how dirty they can be, but this was a headline by the Gateway Pundit. Someone needs me, so I'm going to pause this. I'll be right back. Well, my doorbell, as you may or may not have heard, was going nuts, and it's been going nuts for like the last, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that. So I finally go out and check. I'm like, maybe somebody's dying out there. No one's there, so electronic doorbells. Could the big man be watching? Well, not the big man, but the deep state. Who knows? Quite possible. All right. So back to it. There was a. So I'm going to read this, and this comes from the Gateway Pundit. Married congressman allegedly had affair with aide before she died by lighting herself on fire. Gonzalez, a 43, married father of 6, representing Texas 23rd Congressional District, which stretches from San Antonio through Uvalde to El Paso, hired Santos Alviez, 35, as a regional district director in 2021. According to a report from the Daily Mail, local police are stonewalling the release of critical evidence, including the 9/11 call, surveillance video, and police records. Sources told the outlet that the affair began shortly after hiring and continued for some time. Now, sources. There's not complete evidence of this being the case. Santos Alviez, a married mother of an 8-year-old son who was separated from her husband, Adrian Alviez, was often seen by Gonzalez's side, including during high-profile events like Elon Musk's 2023 tour of Mexico border in Eagle Pass. The tragic incident occurred on September 13 when Santos Alves poured gasoline over herself in the backyard of her Uvalde home and was engulfed in flames. She was airlifted to San Antonio Hospital but succumbed to her injuries the next day. Home surveillance cameras installed by the estranged husband captured the horrifying moment, and the footage has reportedly been handed over to the Texas Department of Public Safety Criminal Lab for analysis. Investigators have ruled it a self-harm with no evidence suggesting anyone else was involved. However, Uvalde Police Department has refused to release key records, petitioning the state attorney general to keep them sealed, which the Daily Mail noted is an unusual move. The secretary has sparked speculation about political favors being done for Gonzalez. So here is the concern that I have. Excuse me. Why would a mother do that? Leave her child behind? In the Epstein files, which I'm not saying he's in, but let's be clear, people in political power have been known forever to have people come after them for to get entangled in situations where they are compromised. And so these are things when it happens. So I'm hoping that Mr. Gonzalez and this information is completely false. There's no truth behind it. Frankly, it needs to be proved on the other side. But the bottom line is, if it's out in the public record, there's questions, and we need to find out exactly what happened with that woman as best we can, because that is an awful way to go. And that's not a common way for women to commit suicide, a very uncommon way for women to commit suicide. In fact, that's much more of a way that is committed suicide by men. So really, really have some serious questions on what happened there. And I think it's something that needs to be found out, to be shared, and to be part of the public record. I believe that he had nothing to do with it. And like I said, I really hope that he is innocent of all the allegations. But the bottom line is, we also need to know what individuals might have that are compromised, especially in our political arena. And we need to know who those are, because I've always asked. So when I've talked to Mr. Owens, Republican Owens, Representative Owens from Utah, when I've spoken with Senator Lee, it was Representative and now Senator Curtis, I asked him, what's your number one job? What is the number one thing you do? Not number one job, but what's the number one thing? You have a number of things within being a representative, whether it be for the Senate or for the House or whatever the position may be. And this is any office holder. What is the number one thing you do? And probably the number one thing you do is you vote. And what is the most important thing in voting is, in my opinion, is a no vote. A no vote is much more important than a yes vote. A no vote says, I'm standing to the side and I'm not buying in. A yes vote means you're going along with the party. But Even more important maybe than voting yes or no is being a watchman on the hill because you see things are coming. And in my opinion, that's the number one job that they need, that they and number one responsibility they have is being a watchman on the hill. And if your watchmen are compromised, you can't yell down to the gateman, "Hey," you can't yell down to everybody, "Hey, get everything together. We got the bad guys coming over there. They're coming from that, they're coming from that direction, and they're going to be here. They're 10 miles off. They're 20 miles off, something like that." That's what a watchman on the hill needs to do. It needs to say, "Hey, something doesn't look good." And if they're compromised, boy, I don't see that happening. The likelihood of that happening is much, much, much smaller. So we need to make sure that our elected officials aren't compromised. School. um, I'm sure that you all have seen this, and I wish I could show it. School scrambles after teacher goes viral for mocking Charlie Kirk's death at No King's protest Saturday. Um, Nathan Elementary has gone social media dark after one of its teachers was identified as a woman who made a mockery of the assassination of conservative Charlie Kirk at the No Kings protest in Chicago. No Kings protester. This is off of Libs of TikTok. This is the kind of the headline for it. No Kings protester marks Charlie's assassination and signals a bullet to the neck. They want us all dead. So what she did this, and she's a teacher. Sorry, lady, you're out in public. That's probably something you don't want to be doing. Um, I'm going to say if you're in a public place and you're doing something like that, you're probably going to lose your job. I I have I have a concern that those type of individuals are are teaching our children. DHS announces an individual who threatened ICE agents with violence and made up a silly lie to avoid responsibility has been referred to the FBI. A young man who filmed a video threatening ICE agents and then tried to lie his way out of it is about to learn the hard way that there are consequences. A Gateway pundit report: teenager looking individuals went on TikTok last week. They decided to piggyback off of reports of bounties that have been issued against ICE agents. Um, in the video, one of the young men smiles and pulls down his mask, and rap music begins to play. Um, all right, so kind of the heading for it in the video says, "ICE, we're on our way. Word in the streets, cartels put a 50K bounty on y'all." Okay, here's another problem. The fact that the Democrats have allowed this level of deception and threatening, and it's okay calling calling other members calling members of the Republican Party Nazis. That's got to be one of the most evil and vile things there is. And I'm afraid the Democrat Party may not back off of it. How do we get the Democrat Party to back off of it? I mean, this is why I think Christianity is so important. Because the thing with Christianity is we go, you know what? You sin, I sin, we all sin. We need to forgive one another of our sins. And we need to go, hey, we need to come to the table. And that's why they got to get that. That's why they had to get rid of Charlie Kirk. So, because he was showing people that you can go have difficult conversations, but still get along and have a decent conversation, even if you disagree and you step away and you don't really care for one another's position, doesn't mean you have to say the other person is evil. And I think that's what Charlie Kirk did so very well. Gave his Christian positions. Often he would say, okay, do you want me to take like a Christian position or a biblical position on this? Or do you want me to take a secular position? Obviously, the left typically wanted to do that. But he almost always wound up turning it into a Christian statement towards the end of him doing that. So I think we've got to figure out a way to get the Democrats to turn down the heat. And we've got to find ways to prove when they have done nefarious things, we have got to call that out. And when Republicans do nefarious things, we've got to call that out. We all feel, I think Republicans have felt this way for a long time. A Democrat can do anything. Republicans do the same thing, and they try to get thrown out. And now we're starting to do with our Republicans. Well, if there's allegations of misconduct and so forth, well, the Democrats do it. Unfortunately, it seems like there's a race to the bottom. Trutton Poot me. Well, I'm going to save this for my guest. Breaking news, John Brennan referred to, well, this is not breaking news today, but John Brennan referred to DOJ for criminal prosecution. I'll probably stay away from that. Here, I do want to hit Stephen H. Smith warns if the Democrat Party becomes Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat Party is done, is what his statement is. I don't know about that. They're trying to court the third world, and be very careful with Stephen A. Smith, folks. Stephen A. Smith, we do not want him. This dude says he has a 6-inch screw in his knee from playing basketball back in the day. Had to get a 6-inch screw in his knee, and that ended his college career. Bottom line is they don't have 6-inch screws in people's knees, especially a guy his size. Maybe if he was an NFL lineman, I could see that, or a NCAA lineman, I could see that, or linebacker. But Stephen A. Smith has never been that big. David Pine will be joining us momentarily. I see that his chair is there, and as soon as he gets in his seat, I'll be bringing him on. But folks, we've got David Pine that will be joining me today. David Pine has a Substack, and I am shamefully, I did not have his bio pulled up before I started this show. So I'm attempting to find one of his bios. But David Pine is joining us now. And David, I'm going to bring you on live. David, thanks for joining us, brother. How you doing?
Doing good, John. How have you been?
I've been doing pretty darn well, my friend. Pretty darn well. So grateful to have you here, my friend. And I am looking for one of your last posts that had your information, like your Substack and all of that. And I'm like drawing a blank as I am here in the firing line, not having it. I normally have this pulled up before we start, but I feel like a moron, Dave. I don't even have your I have a couple of your articles, but I don't see any of them that are showing your Substack, where your Substack is and your bio. So let's just do this. I'm going to do my best to do a full introduction, but could you do a brief intro of yourself?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a former U.S. Army officer. I worked on the headquarters staff in D.C. from 2000 to 2003 in charge of armaments cooperation with former Soviet Union, the Middle East, Africa, South America, and since worked as Mike Lee's security policy director, organized his military advisory committee, and I worked for Vivek Ramaswamy as his defense and foreign policy advisor in 2023, principally, and in 2024. But I also have a Substack at dpyne.substack.com, and that's the Real War Substack. And published over 100 articles over the past few years since I got started in 2022, and I was also a contributor to the National Interest from 2018 to 2023, and also deputy executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for being willing to join us here today. You put out a couple of articles, and we need to cover those. We will definitely be going over those. But there is a couple other things that I wanted to get your thoughts on, if that's okay with you. Let's hit those. But here are let me share the articles, the headlines that we've had since September 28th that you've put out. You've put out 3 articles since the last time you were on with me. Reaction to Russia violations of NATO airspace shows how easy NATO could drag us into nuclear war with Russia. That's one. President Trump claims Ukraine can retake all of its territory with Western support. That was on September. So the first one I mentioned was on September 28th. That one was on September 29th. And then on October 5th, Hamas conditionally accepts Trump's 20-point Gaza peace ultimatum. So those are the last things. But I want to hit a couple of your thoughts, get a couple of thoughts from you. These are things that I'd like to cover. So just last weekend, we were told that the America went crazy and stood up against Donald Trump, and peaceful protests and no kings. Now, I must admit it, I think it's kind of funny that they say no kings. I think they should have said no tyrants, because bottom line is, if Trump really was a king, would he have even have let that happen?
Yeah, my response to that is kings don't leave power peacefully. We were told that if Trump lost the election, by either fairly or unfairly, by the election stolen, that he wouldn't leave. He left office knowing the election had been stolen from him. So that's not a king. A king or an autocrat would say, "I have the evidence. We're going to keep working on it, and I'm not leaving office until I've proven it."
Which has been done. I don't know. Oh, come on. That never happens. I can think of a place, Ukraine, for one. There's many places that it's been done throughout the world in the last 5 years. There's supposedly an election that happened.
Yeah, I mean, in Ukraine, they dispense with the election entirely. I mean, that's where the ultimate king is, or dictator, is when a dictator like Zelensky says, the poll numbers aren't looking good for me. I'm at 9 to 16%. I think I'm going to cancel elections indefinitely to stay in power past my constitutional term. At least Putin has elections, right? He has, they're truly democratic elections. The problem is he doesn't let anyone who he thinks is going to, take a lot of votes away from him run. But that wasn't the case early on. With Zelensky, he won this lopsided elections through billionaire oligarchs, as kind of this another corrupt, candidate of theirs, and then he shuts down elections entirely with no excuse constitutionally.
Okay, so I just wanted to hit the Neo Kings, kind of get your thoughts. For me, it looks, and on top of that, it's mainly white people. It's like, of the video that I saw, maybe there might be some places where it's like, 50-50 minorities, but it's mainly white people that are even older than I am, or blue-haired ladies and blue-haired men, or dudes dressed up as unicorns or something like that. And no, I am not being like flippant. There's plenty of video on that. Um, okay, so another thing that I wanted to cover with you. Let's hit a few things that are going on in Russia, or going on with Israel, and let's talk a little bit of the history of Israel and Gaza, so we can get to this current Gaza conflict. The history of Israel back from the 1800s. I'm going to wax a little bit. Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints historical record. Back in the mid 1800s, they sent one of their apostles there to give to use his apostolic position to call for the gathering of Israel. Now, the rest of the world may not see that, but a number of people here in the that happen to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, hey, we would say that's a certain standard point. And then moving forward into the 1900s, I believe it was after the end of World War II, Israel was created, but Israel wasn't the only nation created out of that same, I believe it was a treaty or something along those lines in like 1948. I want to say Jordan was created, and I believe there was another country created, but that also brought in Israel. Israel then becomes a country. Also, Jews were trying to get into what is current Israel during the Holocaust. So let's kind of, I want your thoughts and a little bit of history from your perspective up to that point.
Yeah, so the Balfour Declaration, I think it was around 1917, basically said that the Jews could come back to Palestine. Palestine was had been Arab for centuries, many centuries. The Jews, of course, were mostly cleared out by Romans. Shortly after the death of Jesus Christ, and so the Jews began gathering, and there was a lot of talk. The Zionists, there were Zionist terrorists. There were two principles of terrorist groups that were agitating for the establishment of an Israeli state. And of course, there were peaceful Zionists as well. I mean, I've long considered myself a Christian Zionist. I've always supported the existence of the state of Israel, specifically the existence of the Jewish state of Israel. I've since started to question that commitment for reasons I'll tell you later. But I've always supported, Israel's legitimate right of self-defense. But Israel was essentially there in 1947, following the end of World War II. There was essentially a carve out between the Palestinian sections and the Jewish sections. And previous to that, by the way, Hitler supported a Jewish state in Palestine, and he tried to deport the Jews to Palestine, which would have prevented them from being mass murdered by him. But the British wouldn't allow it. So the rest was history, of course. 6 million dead because Hitler killed them, number one. And number two, Churchill refused to allow them to be deported to Palestine. But 1947, there was.
I wonder why Churchill did that. I would love to ask Churchill, why did you do that?
Churchill, he was a war criminal. He was a mass murdering monster like Hitler. The numbers weren't as great. He famously laughed about 3 million Indians he starved to death in India during the Bengal famine. I think it was 1942 or 43. And of course, he was a racist like Hitler, white supremacist. Difference, of course, is he was fighting on our side of the war, so we try to cover up all of those facts. But he was a Germanophobe, someone who despised Germany, despised Germans, wanted to destroy Germany. And so he didn't want to make any compromises with Germany. I don't think it was because the British were many of the British, not all the British leaders, were opposed to the Jews, a large Jewish population moving to Palestine because they feared losing Palestine. They were a colonial empire and they wanted to maintain every inch of their empire. And that was one of the reasons I think that they wouldn't allow it. But I think mainly it was just out of hatred for Germany. He didn't want to compromise with Hitler as well at all. And I understand the rationale for that, that thinking. But it unfortunately, he was in a position to save 5 to 6 million Jews. And for reasons that we don't know for sure, he chose not to. But in any case, with the 1947, there was a partition plan that partitioned the Palestinian Mandate, which was essentially a British colony, along, the Palestine, of course, encompassing historic Israel from ancient Israel. And it was the majority of the population was very strongly on the Arab side, probably 2 to 1 at that time. In fact, it might have even been greater. And despite the fact that there were, 2 to 1 population superiority between Arabs to Jews, the Jews got like about 50, I think it was about 58% of the land, and they got the best parts, and they got to ethnically cleanse the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, from the best parts of Palestine, the most productive, the most fertile. And needless to say, that left the Arab states. There were 5 Arab states that went to war against Israel in the War of 1948, and very unaccepting of Israel's new borders. And Israel fought a war, and they were successful, brilliantly successful, with almost no modern, heavy arms. I wrote a paper in my first year at BYU when I was a U.S. Army cadet, and Israel's performance in their 4 first wars of 1948, 56, 67, and 73 was nothing less than amazing. They just have a tremendous army, tremendously brave soldiers, very technically competent, well-trained, and they were able to produce, much like Hamas today, they were able to produce pretty much their own weapon systems, machine guns, automatic rifles, grenades, mortars, basic things like that, probably bazookas, rocket launchers. And with those weapons, they were able to defeat the 5 combined armies, Arab armies that went against them, which were armed with a limited number of tanks and combat aircraft. Then, of course, I don't want to get into too much detail about the different wars. We know that there was the Liberty incident, the USS Liberty, which was the Israelis tried to sink. It was a U.S. spy ship, killing and wounding over 200 U.S. Navy sailors. Word is that LBJ was blackmailed by the Israel, presumably because Israel threatened to expose his adulterous affairs, which were legendary. We know that now. It wasn't common knowledge at the time. That was back at a time where where that was an issue. And nowadays, it's people get elected all the time with.
It's almost like if they're not having an affair, they're not electable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're not cool if they haven't had affairs, they haven't cheated on their wives. So that's really a tremendously terrible statement on the state of the U.S. constitutional republic. But in any case, the reason that they try to sink the USS Liberty is because U.S. intelligence had intercepted information or that they were afraid that they would, proving that they were executing Egyptian army POWs as they advanced into the Sinai Peninsula and across the Sinai as well. So that was something that they thought it would be a PR disaster. And the prime minister at the time, whose name I forget, made the decision to execute a bunch of U.S. Navy sailors to try to prevent that from happening, calculating that they had the goods.
Speaking of being on the speaking of the Liberty, when you say execute, right? You're talking about Navy sailors. You're talking about the Liberty, the people on the Liberty. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So that decision was made, and they had reason to believe that LBJ would do nothing in response. And if it was any other country, I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine if the Russians had done that? The Soviets, sent torpedo bombers and fired rockets from jets, and torpedo. It wasn't torpedo bombers. Sorry, it was torpedo boats and missiles and rockets fired from aircraft, Israeli Air Force aircraft, and they tried to cover it up. They tried to excuse it, and then Israel obviously invaded a bunch of its neighbors.
I want to throw in one more thing about LBJ when it comes to the Liberty. There was, I want to say it was one of the aircraft carrier commanders, the admirals leading the aircraft carrier group, was sent jets to fly off to go defend the Liberty. And he was told, hey, you need to have your turn, those planes are turned around. And he said, unless the president reaches out to me, I'm doing no such thing of the sort. And LBJ, the story is, and I think this has been validated pretty well, got on the phone with that guy, got on the horn with him and said, I want that GD ship sunk to the bottom. So
that's what LBJ supposedly said?
Yes. There's some pretty good reports of LBJs actually having said, yeah, I want that ship sunk to the bottom. So it was his word that said, turn those planes around. There's a lot that I've watched about the members of the Liberty just coming out and speaking themselves, and then talked about the hearings that one of the admirals said that is what he was told by LBJ. So yeah, apparently that's new to you. I will do my best to find a reference point. But yeah, that I think that's something that I've heard from, I want to say, more than one source. So yeah, I think that was one of the most dastardly moments that shows our own United States government turning our backs on our military men. So continue.
Yeah. So Israel, of course, they occupied a lot of different territories. Gaza, of course, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Golan Heights. Golan Heights was part of Syria, not very populated. I don't have any issues with them annexing that. And then the Sinai, of course, we had the Camp David Accords in 1979, which Israel, decided to vacate the Sinai in exchange for, $3 billion a year in foreign aid, which they've enjoyed ever since, and a couple billion a year to Egypt in foreign aid. And those accords are very successful. I think that was a good model for success for Middle Eastern peace that we should strive to emulate. But of course, they invaded Lebanon. We had 241 Marines killed probably by Iranian-backed terrorists that may have had links to Iraq as well. And then we pulled out of Lebanon, and Reagan was smart to do that. That was part of a UN peacekeeping mission, and there were some efforts by President Bill Clinton to try to have the Oslo Accords were fairly successful. I think it was in '93, bring together Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister to try to, maybe create a lasting peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But the problem is with Israel, and this is what I referenced earlier, is that while I support Israel being a Jewish state, if you were to look at the population and combine the Palestinian Arab population and the Jewish population, the total is 10.6 million Arabs, Palestinian Arabs, and 7.6 million Israeli Jews. So we have a country that encompasses the vast majority of that area, probably 80% at this point, excluding the West Bank and Gaza. Maybe 76%, but something along those lines, that controls all that territory, and they're only about 40% of the population of the Palestinian region. And so, what I'd love to see is some kind of, and maybe some of your viewers may attack me for this, some kind of unitary state And it doesn't have to be equal rights. I'd love it to be equal rights. I'd love it to be a democratic state. But I understand why Israel would never agree to it, because if there was a democratic state, they'd lose every election because the Palestinians would have a majority. But I just want to see, I don't want to see Palestinians mass murdered anymore, as Israel's been doing in Gaza. I want to see them have, they're second class. They're worse than second class citizens in Israel. It's kind of an apartheid state where it's great for Jews, not good for Christians. We can't really preach, send missionaries to Israel, of course. But the Palestinians are just really mercilessly persecuted. They're detained, they're held hostage in Israeli prisons without, tortured reportedly. And obviously Hamas is just as brutal. I'm not trying to say that Israel is worse than Hamas. Obviously, that I would never say that. But Israel pretends to be like a democratic state, that grants equal rights when it never has, or at least it hasn't in my lifetime.
Okay, so one thing that Ben Shapiro loves to point out, and I'm going to bring up Ben Shapiro. He loves to point out, hey, we have judges that are Islamic. We have the people who are Islamic are allowed to vote in our elections. What are your statements to that?
Well, I share some of his concerns. I believe that Islam is not a religion of peace. I believe that its most extreme elements, Sharia Muslims or Islamists, I think that they're evil to women. They kill gays. They abuse women. Don't want them to be educated in schools. Take away their rights. So I'm not a fan of Islamists. I do think there's a lot of peace-loving Muslims, and I think that they're good people in every religion, whether it's Jews, Christians, or Muslims, or Asian religions, whatever the case might be, Hindus. And so we have to separate the terrorists like Hamas from the innocent. And instead, 83% of casualties among the Gazan people are civilians, and in the case of Ukraine, it's less than 2%. So, 98+% of the Ukrainians that have died in the war in Ukraine from Russia have been military, troops, military servicemen, whereas 83% of those who have died in Gaza from Israel have been civilians. So, it's a collective punishment campaign. We've seen it from Israel against Gaza. I think they've killed about roughly 15, probably 11,000 Hamas terrorists. And the interesting thing is, and I haven't mentioned this in an interview yet, because I haven't had the chance, and I just discovered this recently, the casualty ratio between Hamas and IDF soldiers is almost 1-to-1. It's Hamas casualties have been just a little bit higher than Israeli casualties, but in terms of killed and wounded, it's been pretty comparable.
Really?
Which is, if you look at the total casualties for Gaza, then it's about 6-to-1, which is what we see in between Russia and Ukraine. In Russia and Ukraine, over 6 Ukrainian soldiers have died for every Russian soldier that's been killed by Ukraine. And in the case of Gaza, it's also 6-to-1. But the problem is only one out of 6 Gazans who have been killed are actually Hamas fighters. So, Israel has suffered the most massive casualties they ever have in any war. It's a counterinsurgency war on a large scale. They've just obliterated it. I think the studies have shown that there's been 200,000 pounds of TNT worth of TNT dropped on Gaza by Israel, which is the equivalent of over 13 Hiroshima atomic bombs. So just this massive destruction. Obviously Trump talked about earlier this year how it looked like the face of the moon just completely obliterated. I always talk about, I'm a World War II historian. I talk about the terrible things we did to the Germans, bombing the German cities. There's only 20% of the German people were rendered homeless during the World War II, during 3 or 4 years of bombing. And in Gaza, it's 90%, with 92% of the homes destroyed, about 80% of the total buildings destroyed. So we just obliterated, we've obliterated 90% of God, or I say we, Israel. I don't want to make that mistake, but
I was about to say, how much is the U.S. involved in that? Okay.
Well, we give them the weapons, we give them the dumb bombs. So Israel brags about we've never fought. No country's ever fought a war that's been more concerned about avoiding civilian casualties, and that is like the biggest lie that's ever been told. Because they use dumb bombs. If they were trying to avoid casualties, they'd use smart bombs. They'd use precision guided munitions. They're just dropping dumb 1-ton bombs all over Gaza, hospitals, schools. Yes, in a few instances, there are Hamas fighters in the region, but they've also bombed refugee camps. They've assassinated humanitarian workers. We of course know that they repeatedly tried to assassinate Hamas peace negotiators, because they don't want peace. Netanyahu has this situation where he's very close to being indicted for massive corruption charges. And he knows that if he loses power, then he's going to go to jail, go to prison most likely. And so he's been doing everything he can to prolong this war, which obviously Hamas started. But increasing people even like Charlie Kirk are saying that there must have been an Israeli stand-down order. Sadly, he was assassinated, but there was likely an Israeli stand-down order. He didn't accuse Netanyahu, but he said at a very high level, because I'm in Israel, as part of U.S. Department of Defense delegation, and there's soldiers, it seems like at every corner. They're just, I rode a bus along with other officials, and there were just IDF soldiers everywhere, everywhere you look. So it's kind of a garrison state. Gaza is very small, and it was completely walled off and surrounded.
So I want to hit my thoughts on October 7th. And we've talked about that. I want to repeat that again, but I'm going to briefly pause for just a moment for a station break. I want to mention that, folks, you are watching and listening to David Pine, Deputy Executive Director of the EMP Task Force. We're grateful to have him join us. You can go to his Substack at d.pine, Pyne, at substack.com, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I got it right.
Yeah.
At least that one from memory. And you can go to his Substack and find out more about him. But you are watching this on kmmu.org, Main Street Media, Utah. We like to have David here monthly, and sometimes we have him a little bit more frequently than monthly. But folks, the way we do that is here on Main Street Media, Utah. Go to kmmu.org, and you can click on our links to X, YouTube, and Rumble, and see the videos that we have of his past shows and all the other great guests that we've had, as well as all the other great hosts like the Gowd Crowd and Political Head Trauma. Just a number of great people. Every evening we have, and every day we are putting out new content. At least, let me rephrase that. Every weekday we get new content put out. So David Pine, back to our conversation. Thank you for letting me do that quick, brief break. Okay, so October 7th happens. When I heard October 7th happened, and it was a complete surprise, and that it took like 7 hours for the regular army to wind up showing up, I was like, something smells rotten in they say, the statement is something smells rotten in Denmark. Well, something smelled very fishy in Israel. I'll tell you that much. Why? Because Israel has one of the MI6 is world renowned, possibly the absolute best at being able to infiltrate every corner of the globe, especially when it comes to Gaza and the surrounding territories. I mean, they know the difference. So
you mean the Mossad?
Sorry, the Mossad, not MI6. Yeah. I apologize, Mossad. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. So the Mossad is world renowned for being able to have their eyes and ears everywhere. They have individuals that know the difference of, you better say potato, not potato, or you might get killed at a checkpoint for saying, making that type of difference in verbiage. Also, another thing that they are known for is like that area that they traped across was some of the most high-tech surveillance in all of the world. I had Joel Skousen on last week, and we went over this again, and he's like, they should have had aircraft, their Apache equivalent attack helicopters up on station in less than 45 minutes. From a cold start to up on station. And typically, when there's the bottom line is typically they have pilots sitting in planes with the auxiliary power units powering that equipment, fully fueled, fully loaded, ready to go. They typically have them in planes and aircraft. So I do not buy that they weren't able to get up. And then Joel said it's also reported that, when they finally did get aircraft on station, that they actually, unfortunately, probably killed some of their own people. Those things do happen. That's a terrible thing, but those things do happen. But my point is, they should have been there a lot sooner. There is the hero stories of, I believe it's at least one general, if not two generals, that got on station that like took 4 hours, drove their own cars, retired generals that drove their own cars to go and save their children. They were able to beat the military, the Israeli Defense Force. To me, I just go, I don't buy the story. If Netanyahu didn't know and didn't plan for it to happen, he allowed it to go forth. And when they say it's our 9/11, I'm going to agree it's their 9/11. Just like I think it was John Podesta said that Dick Cheney told an Air Force captain 2 or 3 times when they were down in a bunker, and I want to say it was underneath the White House. It was either underneath the White House or it was underneath the Naval Observatory, which the vice president is in. had an Air Force captain said, Mr. Vice President, should we launch the F-16s to go after the planes that are coming in? I think he did it 2 or 3 times. And I want to say it's John Podesta gave his own testimony saying that Vice President Cheney said no each time. So my point is, this was allowed to happen. I believe they knew it was coming and allowed it to happen. They even pulled some of those defense forces out of the way. And like within 2 months, I think it was 2 months before, they took away the rights of the kivuks or the communities to have their own defensive firearms. So to me, it seems like a lot of things happened that don't add up to me when you know that you have a couple miles over yonder a bunch of people that want to kill a bunch of your people. You don't do the things that stop that from being able to defend. Your thoughts, David, and tell me where I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, to me, this the way it looks like based on circumstantial evidence, this was Israel's Pearl Harbor. It wasn't their 9/11, it's their Pearl Harbor. And why do I use Pearl Harbor? Because FDR knew about Pearl Harbor. He provoked Pearl Harbor deliberately during a 14-month conspiracy to try to get the Japanese to sink as many U.S. Pacific Fleet warships as possible to get the American people to support his lust for war with Germany. He wanted to come to Britain's aid. He wanted to fight Hitler, and obviously that was a good cause, a good reason. But he was happy to sacrifice the lives of 2,300 U.S. sailors and Army Air Force folks in the process. And I think that was, interestingly, we lost about 2,300 there during Pearl Harbor, and Israel lost about 1,150, so about half. Which for Israel, of course, is a lot more proportionally to the percentage of their population. But the very fact that Israeli helicopter, and this is what I've heard, I haven't confirmed it independently, but Israeli Air Force, helicopters weren't on scene until I think 6.5 hours after the initial attacks began. And
that's what's been
so
reported. That's everything that I've heard.
And Israel is a tiny country. I mean, you can overfly all of Israel in, I don't know, probably 20, 30 minutes max, right? With a slow-moving helicopter.
My understanding is a helicopter can go from one side of Israel to the other side of Israel in less than 30 minutes.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, minimally, we should have seen heads rolling, right? There should have been an Israeli Knesset investigation. There should have been someone should have been held accountable, just like during the Pearl Harbor hearings. Of course, General Short and Admiral Kimmel, they weren't responsible because FDR, we know, deliberately withheld intel to Pearl Harbor. He told other U.S. bases in the Pacific, base commanders, what was coming, but he didn't tell Pearl Harbor. And so, we've seen nothing of that. We've seen no one be fired, no accountability politically or militarily. But it was a very convenient pretext for Netanyahu to start 7 different wars by his own admission. He brags about it all the time. He says Israel's fighting a 7-front war. Well, how many of those countries attacked Israel? 1. Gaza is not even a country, right? It's a piece of territory that's 57 times smaller than Israel. It doesn't have an army. It doesn't have a navy. It doesn't have an air force. It has a militia, and it's hopelessly overmatched by Israel, which has, fully mobile. When they're fully mobilized, it has 11 times more troops than Hamas fighters have at their disposal. So
idea. I do want to say this, though. I still hold accountable those people from Gaza, Hamas, that came over and killed, raped, mangled, and took people and carried them off. I also think that so this is the area where I'm like, what exactly is the truth and what exactly is the right thing? But there are many supporters of Hamas and those that went and dragged those hostages away of Israel that supported and kept them within their own houses. There's that information that's been shared by the hostages that have been released. It was like, it wasn't just Hamas that was holding me. It was the civilians, quote unquote, the civilians themselves. And also, they were, in underground tunnels and stuff like that as well. But they were they were held captive, and part of that captivity was done in the homes of supposedly just Hamas civilians. And so I'm going, what is the right thing to think about that? So I'm going to throw that at you.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas, they're vile terrorists. Obviously, what they did was inexcusable. It was a terrorist attack. Israel was well within its rights to retaliate, both in terms of bombing strikes and even a temporary invasion. I'd actually argued against invasion. I published an article right after the attacks, and I said that the invasion was, I supported raids, special forces raids to retake the hostages, or alternatively a partial invasion lasting maybe 3 weeks, as they did during the Gaza War of 2009, which was a very successful war. And Netanyahu, he transformed it into a plan to permanently take over Gaza in support of his Greater Israel project, which we know he told the president of Egypt in 2011. I think it was Mubarak. Yeah, I think it was Mubarak. Actually, it was Sisi, President Sisi, who's still president of Egypt. And, he said that he wanted to move out all the Gazans to the Sinai, and Egypt rejected that. But that's really the ultimate goal here is, and that's what Trump's Gaza plan was all about. It was, we deport all the Palestinians. We create a new Palestine that has no, or new Gaza that has no Gazans, has only Israelis and other foreigners that would resettle, deport them to Egypt and Jordan. And then
Egypt and Jordan wants no part of the Palestinians. Okay, the Palestinians have caused problems everywhere they've gone in every single country they've gone to. So that's another thing. So of course Egypt and Jordan and Egypt Jordan would say, hey, there's 2 points. A, we don't trust these people. They're going to cause problems here in our country if we let them in. Secondly, there's this place called the Gaza Strip where they're already at. They can stay there.
Well, yeah, and that was the Israeli. I mean, obviously, Israel could have annexed Gaza and the West Bank at any time, just like they did East Jerusalem. They annexed East Jerusalem with 500,000 Palestinians in 1967, made Jerusalem their united capital, and never given any of those Palestinians any citizenship rights because they don't want them to be able to vote and vote in Arabs into the Knesset. They are as Kami Molinari has stated, or whatever his name is, in New York City mayoral frontrunner, that they are an ethno-religious state, that persecutes ethnic and religious minorities and kind of a ethno-religious supremacist state. And again, I've supported that state for all my life up until very recently, because I think the Jews deserve their own state. And, there is some biblical basis for a Jewish state, but it should be a Jewish state based on Christian principles. And, that's hard because, Judaism and Christian, we have a shared history, but
let me put it this way. Christians are a lot more open to that idea than the Jews are. The Jews are not very open to the idea of let's have a Christian. Let's bring about Israel under a Christian way.
Yeah, I mean, what we want, I misstated myself. I should have said biblical principles, more biblical moral principles. And I don't mean an eye for an eye. I mean like as in the New Testament, which of course the Jews don't believe. But what we want to see is a state in which all people of all religions and ethnicities can live in peace together with, if not equal rights, enough rights so they don't get murdered or imprisoned unfairly or anything like that. And it's this, unfortunately, Israel has been responsible in some way for this radicalism we see in Palestine, because these are nationalists. These are like, just like folks, they're patriots for their own country. And a lot of people don't realize that is they have legitimate grievances. They want to have equal rights. They want to have a country that's not a concentration camp, because Israel turned Gaza into a concentration camp 18 years ago when Hamas was elected to power. And, that was the rationale for that. And it's been under an air, land, and sea blockade ever since. And people have not been starving to death, but they've been very malnourished. And Israel has had a deliberate policy to starve them just enough so they don't die. And they've used food as a weapon to punish the people for having a dictatorship of Hamas that 70% of them, according to the IDF report, don't support. So, here among our fellow Christian conservatives in Utah, I keep hearing, well, every Hamas civilian is a legitimate target, or not Hamas civilian, a Gazan, civilian is a legitimate target because they elected Hamas. Well, going back in time to Nazi Germany, only 23% of Germans alive during Hitler's time, voted for him to lead Germany, and yet we mercilessly bombed them and killed millions of them during and after the war, under the pretense that they deserved it because they elected Hitler. So this whole pretense, we don't punish people, at least under Christianity, we don't punish people for their thoughts or even for their votes. We punish them for their actions, as in, if they commit an act of violence, then they're a legitimate target for, imprisonment or execution or bombing or whatever the case might be. And that the whole idea of just war is really, we've thrown it out the window because, according to Ted Cruz, the Bible tells us to support the state of Israel, which it never has. It never, the Bible doesn't talk about the state of Israel because the state of Israel didn't exist. It talks about Israel as the 12 tribes. Israel scattered across the entire world, and Israel.
The tribe of Judah just happens to be one of the 12 tribes.
That's right. There's only 2 tribes in Israel, in historic modern-day Israel, Judah and Benjamin. And the 10 tribes, of course, were scattered to the four winds of the corners of the globe. And so Israel, of course, ceased to exist anciently. I think it was around 721 BC. So obviously, the Bible doesn't tell us to support a country, a nation that didn't exist. The other nation was called Judah, and it doesn't really talk about Judah; it talks about Israel. So in any case, all the evangelicals that think that a state that didn't exist until 2,000 years later is what we're commanded to support are completely wrong. It just that's just not. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of Christian biblical doctrine.
I think that is one of the best points that we need to start pointing out as Christians is Israel is not just one tribe or not even two tribes. I mean, and if there's the tribe of Benjamin there, I don't hear the tribe of Benjamin talked about in current Israel in the nation state of Israel. They only talk about the Jews. So the bottom line is, basically, when we talk about Israel, the nation state, it's the tribe of Judah, the Jews, and the 11. They don't. the nation of Israel definitely doesn't want to mention that there are 11 other tribes. They want to focus on that they are the only tribe. So that's something that I'd point out too. All right, I want to get to let's get into the article that you did back on October 5th. Let's get into a few of the things. Hamas conditionally accepts Trump's 20-point Gaza war peace ultimatum. Let me just kind of read the first paragraph. On September 29th, President Trump issued a 20-point peace plan that has several good provisions, but also some very dubious ones, including making Trump the de facto head of the newly proposed governing authority of the new Gaza. Trump peace plan is a welcome reversal from past support for permanent Israel military control of Gaza and his previous plan issued in March to ethnically cleanse 2.3 million Palestinians from Gaza to allow it to be settled by Israel. The proposal forbids Israel from occupying or annexing Gaza and require a full Israeli military withdrawal, though with no timetable, and end to its illegal starvation blockade, while putting Gaza and the West Bank on the path to statehood, while Hamas would have to disarm and leave power, receiving full amnesty in exchange. This peace plan was the results of Qatar's proposed a summit between the U.S., eight Arab and Muslim countries: Qatar, Jordan, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So here's another question, kind of along these lines. What about having the Arab countries being the police force for this area? Do they want any part of it? I'm just like, I would love to see the United States. I don't like the idea of the United States and Trump heading up, hey, this is how we're going to go about settling Gaza. Sounds like a 15-minute city to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. So the solution is, well, number one, we should say that Hamas is never going to disarm. The only way they've stated they will only disarm if a new Palestinian state is recognized by Israel, consisting of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. So number one, Israel's never given up East Jerusalem. So that's never going to happen. But is it possible that maybe Hamas could modify that and say if it's just Gaza and West Bank? I think that is possible. But I don't think that Israel, now it's made clear he's never going to allow a Palestinian state or anything resembling it. In fact, he's the one he's one of the Israeli leaders who have allowed the Qataris or facilitated the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars from Qatar to Hamas to fund Hamas. And of course, Israel was responsible in growing Hamas because in 1987, when Hamas was created, they financed it. The Mossad financed it. They didn't create it, but they financed it to help it form a rivalry against the PLO, which was in control of the West Bank. And the idea was if they could keep the the Palestinians divided against each other, they could have these two rival groups, and they could play them off each other, so that there would never be a unified Palestinian state consisting of the West Bank and Gaza. So, Netanyahu's part of that corrupt history in helping to support Hamas, and then of course using that as Hamas as an excuse to kill off 55,000 Gazan civilians to date. But there's not going to be Hamas disarmament. What there could be, what I proposed in this article, is that we should modify the peace plan so that Hamas would have kind of a phased disarmament. So they would immediately give up, as soon as an international stabilization force consisting of those 8 or more Arab troops, 8 or more countries, troops from those countries was able to replace IDF troops occupying Gaza, then Hamas would surrender all of their heavy weapons to those international stabilization force troops, and they would give up their mortars, their long-range rockets, and any other heavy weapons, leaving them with only man-portable light weapons, which would not include mortars. Mortars can be portable, but would not include, would be essentially, machine guns, grenades, rocket launchers, ATGMs, the types of weapons that we would logically provide to a country like Ukraine to be able to defend itself against aggression from its neighbors, in that case, Russia, of course. So, because I think it's important that the Gazan people have some kind of defense force to defend against Israeli aggression. So, do I want it to be Hamas? No, I despise Hamas. I want to see Hamas disarmed. They've agreed to leave power, of course, as part of the agreement, and I have every reason to believe that they would do so following Israeli troop withdrawal. The problem is Netanyahu has said he's not going to withdraw troops from Gaza. At the time of the ceasefire, Israel was occupying 80% of Gaza, which is the most they've occupied since they withdrew back in 2005. And they withdrew to a point that's where they occupy 55% of Gaza. And Netanyahu boasted after the same day, on September 29th, that he was at the White House with Trump, accepting the plan, essentially being forced to accept the plan because he didn't want to, but Trump forced him to, saying that he would always keep a majority of Gaza under permanent Israeli occupation. It's basically what he said, and that's in conflict with the Trump peace plan, which calls for a phased withdrawal, whereby the Israelis would permanently occupy only about 15% of Gaza, and then 85% would be controlled by a new Palestinian Authority once they'd reformed, or at least an international stabilization force operating under the direction of President Trump, essentially, because he's appointed himself to lead what's called, I think it's called a board of peace. So he'd be the chairman of the board of peace. Under him would be Tony Blair, a former British prime minister, kind of a neocon on the British side, and other foreign leaders potentially. But he would be in charge of administering of the decisions in terms of appointing the technocrats, the Palestinian technocrats that would provide services. But in terms of the actual leadership of the new Gaza, that is under this peace plan, it would be President Trump himself. And it doesn't say the President of the United States. It says Donald Trump. It says President Trump, which means to me that Trump wants to be in charge of New Gaza, indefinitely, or at least for longer than his presidency lasts, well into his 80s. So that part's kind of odd, but I think overall the plan is quite good. Has a lot of good elements. Where it falls short is there's no kind of key factors that would trigger. There's no timetable for an Israeli military withdrawal. They withdrew to the yellow line, which gives 45% of Gaza back, or at least 45% free of Israeli occupation troops. But there's no real fixed timetable, and it's just everything's pretty nebulous. And that was all by design, because Netanyahu took Trump's 21-point peace plan that he negotiated with the Arab states, and he made it much more nebulous so that Israel could more easily violate it. Essentially,
okay, so that's something that I've been wanting to say for bring up with you. Can we trust Netanyahu? Can we trust Israel, and can we specifically trust Netanyahu? So one thing that's happening right there that's being reported in the news is Hamas is, pulling out people supposedly and shooting them that they think are tied in with Israel. Well, there's a part of me that goes, are we sure that those aren't, those people aren't being stirred up by Israel, so Israel has a reason to go in and start shooting people again? Meaning, hey, Hamas, these are some Israelis, and they really aren't, Israeli undercover individuals. But the bottom line is, I'm just going, I see no ability to have peace there. I don't. I have no faith. I have like all thing is possible within in God, but I don't see how any peace can happen, and I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, we saw I think it was just yesterday or the day before, where Israel was bombing Gaza. They killed almost 100 Palestinians, almost all civilians, because they claimed that Hamas killed 2 Israeli soldiers. Well, the Trump administration, senior officials have reportedly stated, and this is multiple sources that are saying this, that Trump challenged Netanyahu and said, we know that's not the case. We know that an Israeli bulldozer ran over an Israeli unexploded munition, like a bomb or a artillery shell, and blew up, and Hamas had nothing to do with it. And yet, Israel used that as a pretext for airstrikes on Hamas and Gazan civilians and artillery strikes. And they were only stopped from continuing those strikes by President Trump, who said, "Hey, I told you to stand down. You don't have permission. I know I gave you permission to break the ceasefire and crush Gaza in March, but now I want peace. I want to be the president of peace. That's what I want my legacy to be in the Middle East. Maybe not in Ukraine. We saw today that we should talk about the fact that he backed out of a meeting with Putin, and he's back on the neocon side there. But at least in the Middle East, he's doing a pretty good job."
Well, okay. Last thoughts on the Middle East. We've probably spent 40 minutes on this, and I think it was worth the time, because in general lately when we've been meeting, we've talked mostly about Ukraine and Russia. We haven't talked about Israel quite enough, and also I wanted you to kind of give us a history lesson on what brought us to this point, because how we got here will help us determine what's going to happen in the future. And Netanyahu's got to go. So I'm going to that's my comment. I'm going to be quiet and let you finish your thoughts, and then let's get to the other points of Ukraine, Russia, China, and what happened today.
Yeah, I want to be clear that my beef is not with Israel. My beef is with Netanyahu and his compatriots, the far right in Israel, the leaders that support the mass murder of tens of thousands of Gazan civilians versus the good objective of getting rid of Hamas. That you can't justify the killing of civilians. It's not justifiable under Christianity, under just war principles. And so his opposition leader is what I would consider a liberal. And I've never done this with any other country, but I strongly support this opposition leader to replace Netanyahu, because he does seem genuinely committed to peace, to an ending the war in Gaza. And the war in Gaza is very unpopular among Israelis. 30 to 50% of Israeli military reservists that were mobilized didn't show up because the casualties are so high. It's basically Israel's Vietnam. And, there's a lot of, that's why you saw so much rejoicing in Israel. I mean, especially among the families, it's not like Ukraine where they're dragging, adult males, fathers and brothers and sons onto the street to kidnap them. Sorry, it looks like my computer is getting a little low, so I'm gonna have to rehook that up. Yeah, Netanyahu has to go, and Trump should call for his replacement.
Instead of telling the Knesset, hey, you ought to let this guy go. Who cares about some cigars and wine? So yeah, go ahead and plug in, David. All right, so if you're good, let's move on. Let me tell you the things that I would like to topics of hitting Trump and Putin and why this meeting got canceled. U.S.-Russia relations, Zelensky coming and meeting with Trump. He was asked, so Zelensky was asked by one of the news reporters what he was willing to do for peace, what concessions he was willing to make for peace, and his answer was zero. China-U.S. relations, China withholding rare earth minerals, and I said rate earth minerals, meaning I meant rare earth minerals, and China and Taiwan. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with Zelensky. One of my favorite topics. So Zelensky, we heard yesterday, was reported again from multiple sources, principally the Financial Times, British news outlet, that President Trump had a very colorful meeting, to say the least, with Zelensky. Apparently, it wasn't as bad as his initial meeting as after he became president on February 28th, but it was pretty bad. So they got into a shouting match. He kept repeating profanities.
Meaning Trump or Zelensky?
Trump. Yeah, Trump was yelling profanities at Zelensky, telling him that he needed to accept Russia's peace deal or face destruction by Russia. That Ukraine was losing the war. There was no way they could retake any territory. And what's so interesting about this is just last month he posted on Truth Social. He said they can win and not only take back every inch of their territory, including Crimea, they can invade Russia as well. And he's like, the U.S. will help him.
And he said, we'll give Tomahawk missiles to him as well. Yeah. All right. So.
Yeah. So he's had all these threats. He signed up to sell them 3,550 ERAM air-launched cruise missiles that would be fired by U.S. AF retired combat pilots from Ukrainian F-16s into Russian targets deep inside Russia. And then, of course, he just keeps threatening Putin off. He was threatening Putin off the hook and trying to be a bully, bully Putin into capitulating to U.S. terms, which is the 22-point Kellogg peace plan that was released in late April. And, of course, none of it's going to work. Putin said that the leader of the mightiest nuclear superpower on the planet by far. And, you can't threaten Putin to do anything. He's not going to respond. You have to negotiate. And Putin's willing to negotiate. In fact, he's made, at least 3 major concessions that I've counted, one of which he's given up 2/3 of his territorial demands. He's given up any desire to retake more of Zaporozhye or Kherson Oblast. And he said he just wants back the 12% of the Donbass region that remains under Ukrainian control, which in total is just over 1% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. So it's Trump actually, since we know reports dating from before the Anchorage summit, Trump was given Russian peace plan, and he said he urged Zelensky and EU leaders to take that deal before he even met with Putin. So the deal, a lot of people say, well, the Anchorage summit didn't really result in anything. Because there was no memorandum of understanding. There was no framework agreement, which I was hoping to see. But I believe they got 80 to 90% of the way there. And that's where we're at right now. Based from my understanding right now is if Zelensky would accept the return of, again, that 1% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory to Russia, that we could have a peace deal and end the war this week. Or at a Budapest summit. But unfortunately, Trump, after threatening Zelensky in every which way, throwing, Zelensky, I guess, reportedly took out some maps and said, this is our territory that's under Russian control. This is why we need it. This is why we're not going to give any up, because we have these fortified areas. And then Trump took the maps and like threw them on the ground, so had some righteous indignation, I'll say. And that's what we voted for. We didn't vote for the profanity, but we voted for a president who put America first and said, screw you, Zelensky, screw you, EU leaders. We're going to do what's best for America. And that what's best is to have peace with Russia so we don't get nuked. We don't start World War III. And so he did the right thing during the meeting, and then the meeting ended, and he comes in front of the cameras, and he starts repeating Zelensky's talking points. We have to have a ceasefire. We have to have it along the current line of control. So we're going to reject all of Russia's peace proposals. And then the next day, this morning, Rubio cancels the Budapest summit. So we had the Budapest summit was on the table for like four days, maybe less, maybe three. And now Trump's essentially flushed any hope of peace with Russia down the toilet.
So here's my question: how much of that getting that Budapest summit coming to an end, how much of it is Trump? How much of it is on the Russian side?
Well, it depends what side, what your opinion is. If you're,
I'm asking your opinion, because yeah,
I think it's 100% on Trump's side that why it was canceled. Putin was willing to, again, he had this generous offer with the three major concessions. The first concession I mentioned, the second concession, he gave up denazification, which was, rooting out all these far-right ultra-nationalist extremists from the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, as well as their armed forces. There was an Azov Corps that's, with white supremacists, ultra-nationalists. And these are folks that are just like on the Israeli side. They're hardline anti-Russian. They want the war to continue. They want to retake all the territory. They want to persecute ethnic Russians in Ukraine, which are still 17% of their population.
Okay, folks. So something tells me that somehow David Pine's computer was wound up losing power. I heard heard the sound effect that some type of sound effect from his computer, and I'm guessing that for some reason it wasn't powering up. Hopefully David can join us here in a few minutes. I'm assuming he will. In fact, if you don't mind, I am going to real quickly do a voice text with him. Hey, David, I assume that your computer died on you. Join us back as soon as you can. So I'm going to leave up my phone for just all right, there we go. There's David. Let's bring him back on. So forgive me if your phone dings. It's me. I'm assuming that you're somehow it wasn't powering up properly. Okay, so David, I can't hear you. I see you. You're a little fuzzy.
Okay, there we
go
go.
Out fuzzy. And come back in. Oh wait, whoa! There we go. There we go. But let's see if hopefully that echo goes away. And it sounds like it may be. So we were back. Let's see, where were we at right before we left?
Yeah, I was talking about the three Russian concessions. So the second one was denazification. Denazification, by the way, includes Zelensky having an election, democratic election, to give the Ukrainian people the right to vote him out or reelect him, because, of course, he is, considered illegitimate by the Russians because he stayed past his constitutional term in office, which expired in May of 2024, so almost 18 months ago. That demand, they still have that demand, but they're willing to not put it into writing. And then the last one is they're allowing Ukraine to have, in their original Istanbul agreement, they said Ukraine has to disarm its military reduce it in size to about 100,000 troops, maybe 150,000 max, which is about half the size of the Ukrainian army before, in terms of active duty troops before the war. And they have to give up a lot of their heavy weapon systems, mainly their strike systems. So based on my reading, is they're only requiring Ukraine to give up their long-range strike weapons, but they're allowing Ukraine to keep all of their defensive weapons, to have a military as big as they want to. And they can say that because Ukrainian military, according to the Ukrainian Army Commander-in-Chief, has been reduced to 233,000 men under arms. So their military at one point was 1.2 million, but they've lost over 2 million casualties, according to my estimates, the estimates that I've seen from the Jamestown Foundation and other sources. So, that's a million less troops, basically. And Russian forces are outnumbered them by 3 to 1 currently within Ukraine. And they have up to 300,000 troops outside of Ukraine on Ukraine's borders. And then they also outnumber Ukrainian forces by up to 6 to 1 at critical sections of the front in the Donbass region. So that's why you're starting to see Pokrovsk fall to the Russians. That's currently happening. So that'll be a major defeat by the Ukrainians. But essentially, Trump was right. As he told Zelensky on Friday, Ukraine's defeat is inevitable. And if Putin wants to destroy you, destroy Zelensky, that is, or destroy Ukraine, he can do it. And he's absolutely right. As I've been saying for years, all Putin has to do is reinvade Kyiv Oblast from Belarus with maybe 300,000 troops. And he could easily surround Kyiv, wouldn't have to occupy it, but he could take all of Kyiv Oblast. And Zelensky would be lucky to escape with his life. He would essentially be forced to capitulate on Russian terms. And there's Russian hardliners within Russia that have been urging Putin to do that. And Putin has refused to do it because he has no desire to have that territory. I think he should do that. He should have done it a long time ago. But for whatever reason, he's wanting to simply attrit to Ukrainian armed forces so that they don't have any manpower. 2 generations of Ukrainian men have been largely wiped out. More amputees as of 18 months ago or 2 years ago than there were in France at the end of World War I.
Oh, wow.
So it's just staggering numbers of casualties.
Something that makes I'm like, how do I put this? It seems like Zelensky doesn't want the money stop coming to him and his coffers. I'm going, NATO, what in the world is going on with you guys? Because Russia, and something also that I think Trump mentioned last week is, hey, we've got, basically pointing out the fact that we've got our own supplies that are being dwindled, our own military supplies that are being dwindled, and we need to stop this war so we can build them back up. Trump, I can't remember if it's 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 that Russia is producing more ammunitions, more artillery shells, more missiles. 4 to 1, it's either 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. What all of NATO combined is doing. This is heading for a very bad place, and I'm worried about China sitting back and just going, I'm really concerned about that. What are your thoughts, David? Did we just lose David again? We may have lost David again. I am not sure what's going on. Or it could be me. So I'm going to reach out to David real quick. Well, I do have a way of kind of figuring out whether I'm on or whether David's on. I'm not sure if it's you or I'm not sure if it's me. Try getting back in. All right. So we're trying to figure out. Looks like it is me that is still in, and looks like the connection. I am going to quiet that down because you guys were hearing me. I was going to our feed to see what was going on. So you were able to hear me, kind of. So please forgive me on that one. But I'm just trying to figure out what is happening. And I'm going to say to David, uh, try to reconnect. Try to reconnect. This has been an interesting day. Um, okay, David, you there?
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
All right. Okay. You dropped off and you came back on. Okay. Something's weird is going on. And let me tell you how I know that something weird is going on. Here at my house, the doorbell was going bonkers. I mean, like ring, 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 ring over and over again. I don't know if it came through, but I actually, before you joined me and then after you joined me, it was going bonkers until my other people in my house got home. So I'm like, something fishy's going on. And then now it's like, I'm almost wondering if the deep state doesn't want you talking on here, David, or who has the bounty on your head? Oh, yeah, that would be Ukraine. Maybe they don't want you on as well. I'm not sure. So we've got about 11, 12 minutes left, or at least until 6 o'clock if you want to go a little longer. I don't want to push it much longer than 6 o'clock, but I want to give you all the space to bring your thoughts forward. So what I was saying is, with all the munitions that are being produced by Russia, our supplies are dwindling. I'm worried that China is starting to get a little, happy. They're producing their war. Also, we've got North Korea that's in on Russia's side, learning how to fight. That really concerns me because South Korea is not doing anything along those lines. Um, and I just go, okay, NATO, you guys you need Russia's gas. You need Russia's natural gas. You need it'd be nice if the United States could form some type of alliance with Russia and get some of that rare earth minerals because China's got, 90% of the rare earth minerals are in control of China. So I definitely want your thoughts on that if we can. So I don't know. I mean, as with David Pine, here's the problem with David Pine, folks. He is so knowledgeable. I always go, we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. I get worried actually, I'm not really worried about this show. I wasn't worried, but I'm like, with David Pine, I've always been worried we're going to run out of things to talk about. We're going to have to end the show half an hour early. David, as I've come to find out over the last couple of years, having David Pine on, the man's not short on knowledge. So, David, what are your thoughts? Is there a way to get this? Do you see this coming to an end? Or do you see this getting worse?
Well, I think it's really interesting because Trump had this what he called a very productive call with Vladimir Putin on Thursday. So he gets all excited. He has 2.5 hours to talk to Putin. Putin basically, I'm assuming, he says, "Hey, U.S. and Russia could have this rare earth minerals deal. We could make America rich. We could increase your GDP by 1%, whatever the case might be." And all we need to do is we need a face saving exit. We need all of the Donbass. You pressure Zelensky to give us that. We'll end the war on with the deal on the table. Let Ukraine have this huge military with all these weapons, and we'll call it a day. And
now,
Trump.
Does the Donbass have a bunch of rare earth minerals? Is it? What does Donbass have? What does the Donbass area have as far as, is it food? Is it farming? Is it rare earth minerals? Is it both? What are your...
Yeah, the Donbass area is the most mineral rich area of Ukraine historically during World War II. whenever you have an area that's rich in rare earth minerals, you have areas that are highly industrialized. So we have a densely populated area of Ukraine. It's highly industrialized. It has a lot of important minerals. Ukraine is mineral rich overall, so it certainly could survive without the Donbass. But the Donbass is one of the most productive economic regions of Ukraine. So, of course, they don't want to get rid of that. They don't want to lose that. But Russia already controls 88% of the Donbass region. So we're talking about the 12% of essentially of the Donbass, which is in western Donetsk Oblast, which is again a fortified belt of Ukrainian towns and cities, which the Russians have been assaulting, front on, but with massive artillery support. So they've had very low casualties. In fact, their casualties are at historic lows in terms of this point in the war. Well, the Ukrainian casualties keep going up, and so the Ukrainian forces are losing, 10,000, maybe 19,000 average a month in terms of troops. That's including after casualties, permanent casualties, which is seriously wounded, killed in action, and deserters, which they have an incredibly high number of deserters, numbering into a few 100,000. And they're just getting worn down, and so that's why they're facing these massive odds. And of course, Ukrainian troops are brave, but they're not stupid. They know it's it's just suicide. It's just a matter of time before they get killed off, and so they want to end the war. And they don't get rotated. Russian forces are fresh. They're all volunteer, 100% volunteers. Ukraine's their volunteer army has been destroyed a couple times over, and now they just have draftees that don't want to be there and are just fighting to survive, just trying to survive from day to day. But they're being bombarded massively with, these huge 3,000 to 5,000 pound bombs that Russia's dropping from heavy bombers. And then, of course, fuel air explosives. They have, TOS-1 fuel air explosive, long range rocket systems that completely burn, just annihilate anything that they touch. And of course, artillery. You mentioned that Russia produces 4 times more heavy artillery shells than all of NATO combined. That's 32 countries, including the United States. And that's not the only area that they outproduce us. It's across the board. I mean, they have the most massive tank force on the planet, 15,000 tanks at the start of the war. Even if they only have 11,000 or even 10,000 today, that's still way more than we have. And, they have their Air Force is 12. Start of the war is 12 times larger than Ukraine's, probably a lot larger than that now. And in terms of artillery systems and munitions, it's probably 10 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1. So it's just a hopeless fight. The Ukraine has basically been a pawn in terms of Western imperialism to try to weaken Russia, and they've certainly done some damage. But the Russian military is far, far stronger today than it was at the beginning of the war. So it's had the exact opposite effect. We've made Russia, from a great power to essentially a conventional military superpower. It's more powerful militarily than at any time during the Soviet Union. Of course, its nuclear might hasn't changed, so it was already well in excess of us in that area. But it's more allied to China, more dependent on China, North Korea, and Iran, so that we've strengthened the enemy alliance system. Anyone who's read Sun Tzu's The Art of War knows one of the most important ways to defeat an enemy is to weaken their alliance system. So just as you mentioned, the best strategy for Trump, and that this is one that he talked about back in November with Tucker Carlson in a rally. He said, "Yeah, I want to divide the Sino-Russian alliance, and I want the U.S. to have better relations with Russia." And he actually has talked about how he wants to make Russia a geostrategic partner, which would, primarily economically, not militarily, but economically. So we'd have these, multi-$100 billion deals with Russia to help develop their, have the raw earth mineral sales. I think Putin mentioned he had like 2 million tons worth of raw earth minerals he wanted to sell to us. So I mean, there's no reason for us to be enemies. The only reason Russia and the U.S. are enemies is because of NATO expansion, NATO imperialist expansion, which has expanded all along Russia's western frontier. And imagine the U.S. reaction if Russia, transformed Canada into a Russian satellite, and we'd be going berserk. We'd be bombing, invading, and annexing all of Canada just to try to get the Russians out of there.
Do you see this coming to an end, a peaceful end, anytime soon? Or do you think we're going to be talking about this next summer?
So I think, unfortunately, Trump has become pretty predictable. He gives us these rays of hope, like, his temper tantrum against Zelensky, which was very good, very America first, very courageous. And then, he goes out in public and repeats all of Zelensky's talking points. So he's basically gives in, he surrenders, he capitulates. And that's the interesting thing is we keep being told that, it's important that Trump doesn't capitulate to Putin, or he doesn't get played by Putin. Well, the problem is he's been getting played by Zelensky the entire time. So, Zelensky keeps manipulating him. EU leaders, Macron in France and Starmer in Britain, Merz in Germany, they're all manipulating Trump to do whatever, do and say whatever they want him to do.
And that's one of my biggest concerns. I think Donald Trump right now is being played like a fiddle, and he doesn't even realize it.
That's right. So they played Biden. Zelensky played Biden like a fiddle, as Trump stated. But instead of declaring independence from Ukraine, from Zelensky, he's doubled down. He's giving him more long range systems by far. At least he's said he's made an agreement to sell them to Ukraine. He hasn't done so yet. It's supposed to begin this month. Than Biden ever dreamed. And he's more willing to risk World War III than Biden was. He's crossed more red lines than Biden has. And so, all of his pledges with regards to Ukraine are coming up flat. He's not delivered on his promises. He had the Anchorage summit, and that was amazing. And he got 80 to 90% of the way there. And then he flushed it all down the toilet. And then he teased it again. He's like, hey, we got the deal on the table. I'm trying to get Zelensky to sign it, and then he flushed that down the toilet. So I guess my answer to your question is, this is going to end, two ways. It's probably not going to end in a peace deal. Well, it could end in a peace deal, but it's going to end in a peace deal where at a time when the Ukrainian military has already collapsed, likely next summer, and Russian tanks are advancing all the way to the Dnipro River, which would give them control of 45% of Ukraine, including part of the Ukrainian capital. So at that point, Russia's terms are going to be a lot, they're going to demand twice as much territory, not 20%, probably 40 or 45%. And, Ukraine's going to be a rump state that is just, it's just a Western satellite that has no real independence of its own. And that's, the irony is we talk about, Zelensky's always talking about, we need our sovereignty. We need our independence. Ukraine has never been less sovereign or independent as a NATO satellite than it is at any point since the fall of the Soviet Union. Obviously, it was a controlled, annexed area of the Soviet Union, so it was enslaved at that point. It's not enslaved today, but it's entirely dependent on the West for its very survival, both financially and economically and militarily as well. And what Russia has been offering has been a sovereign Ukraine. Russia's been offering a sovereign and independent, neutral Ukraine that would be a buffer state between the West, between NATO and Russia, and that's what they delivered. They delivered 100% of Ukrainian territory under a neutral, independent Ukrainian state and government from 1991 to 2014, and that was only interrupted because the U.S., the CIA, overthrew the Ukrainian president Yanukovych. That started this whole Ukraine war with the Russian reaction, of course, invading the Crimea and a civil war in the Donbass region.
So what you're telling me is plan on us having this conversation in January again.
I think so. Yeah, the mud season is starting in early November, so I think the chances that Putin will do the right thing for Russia and invade Kyiv are quite minimal at this point. I thought he would, but he's really pretty restrained. He's, we hear all this talk, among neoconservative circles here in the U.S. and friends of ours, I'm sure, saying, "Oh, Putin's the problem. He's not willing to negotiate. Trump needs to teach him a lesson. We ought to, send him nuclear-capable tomahawks and maybe start World War III with them, just to teach him a lesson and show Putin who's boss." We always hear that. We need to teach him who's boss.
Yeah. Putin has a lot more nuclear missiles than we do. Let's not do that.
Yeah, real bad idea. So that's a recipe for disaster, and we need to do everything we can to avoid it. And President Trump, deep down, he knows that. In private, he acts accordingly, but then he's Rubio and all the neocon dead enders in the White House whisper in his ear and say, "No, you can't do that. You can't say that. Just keep doing what Biden did. Double down. Be twice as bad as Biden on Ukraine, and hope for the best, and hope Russia doesn't nuke us." It's a horrible strategy, but that's the level of idiocy we see in the Trump administration, unfortunately.
Okay, it's 6:03. I want some quick thoughts on China. Can I get those? Can I get some quick thoughts on China?
Absolutely.
Let's China-U.S. relations. They seem to be worse than ever. China withholding rare earth minerals, and Trump talking about tariffs, and then China and Taiwan. It's October. It's the calm seas. I don't hear talk that China is invading right now, so we may have passed that concern. We're almost towards the end of October for the calmer seas between Taiwan and China. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. So October is the prime season for amphibious invasion, as is April. And at this point, we're at October 21st. It seems quite certain that they're not going to make an invasion move this month or next, or this year at all. Blockade, of course, could be implemented at any time. So there's always a risk. And I think a blockade is actually the most likely Chinese move. I don't think we'll see a snap invasion, although they're certainly capable of invading and conquering Taiwan, and taking Taipei within 15 days, according to the experts.
I think they want all the high tech that they can get out of Taiwan they possibly can. I think there is no desire to bomb a bunch of buildings.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is that during the Biden administration, they had, I think, 3 massive naval exercises in 2024. I don't think they've had a single one since Trump came to office. And I don't think it's because they're afraid of Trump. I actually think it's the opposite. I think that they actually have some degree of hope they might be able to negotiate something better with Trump. Trump's given, he's given some indications that he might be able to negotiate a deal. I think he really wants to. I think he wants to get the Ukraine war ended. He wants to, make Russia an economic, geostrategic partner. And then he wants to go to China and say, "Hey, you just lost Russia as an active military ally, but we want peace with you. Let's negotiate a deal with you guys." So it's kind of strategic sequencing. His plan is really brilliant. He's just really bad at execution. So the plan is to, make peace with Russia, make them kind of a quasi, not an ally, but, a partner, and, do all this business with them and kind of wean them away from China economically and militarily, with while they still are allies on paper, and then go to China and say, "Hey, you're not as strong as you used to be. We're kind of the U.S. and Russia. We're getting more aligned. So we want to have this tripolar world where none of us are actually allies. No superpowers are allies. We're not outnumbered. So the U.S. is no longer outnumbered by Russia and China. So now we're negotiate with you on an equal basis, maybe even a superior basis, as he would think it. And so we want to give you something on Taiwan to make you not want to invade." And I think that's their mentality. And for that reason, I don't think China plans to make a move on Taiwan until next year, 2027.
Rare earth minerals and China relations, China-U.S. relations.
Yeah, so this is really predictable. China, of course, has decided to cut us off pretty much, at least for the time being, from rare earth minerals. And this is this is what I campaigned against. Early on at the time, 1999, 2000. I wasn't really in a position to make a difference, but I posted a lot about it on social media. That this whole globalization idea of basically making China rich, making our communist enemy, as rich as we are, or maybe richer.
We've paid for their military. The United States has paid for their military.
Yeah, we did that to some extent with the Soviets, but much less. And with China, we literally have given them trillions of dollars in terms of subsidies. I think we give them 165 billion on average per year in U.S. taxpayer subsidized trade and direct subsidies. Really, I think that's mostly direct subsidies, but there's also 7 billion through the Export-Import Bank that we give them, and we have given them every year. So basically, just we're to use Lenin's term, we're giving them the communist leaders of China the rope with which to hang ourselves, and that's it's just really a horrible idea, and it was so predictable. And all the neocons, all the quote unquote conservatives bought into it. Whether it was Gingrich, the Republicans in Congress, George Bush, Dick Cheney, all the hardline anti-Russian, anti-China people today, bought into that, and they supported it. And it was.
I remember in 96, 97 having this conversation with my roommate, saying, he was going, "Oh yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. We're getting these free products, these cheap products over from China." I said, "They're going to build our military. They're going to build their military, and this is going to come back to haunt us. This is and we're going to lose jobs. We're going to lose manufacturing to them." And I got together with him a few years ago, and he was saying what you and I are saying right now, and I said, "Do you remember me saying that was a bad idea back then?" And he's like,
"Yeah." Well, and the worst part is the deindustrialization. It's we're not just making them rich. We're not just transferring trillions of dollars to China.
We're sending all of our buildings over there to help them build, and we're sending them out of the United States.
Yeah. High-tech, tens of thousands of high-tech dual-use military industries, including, of course, Apple and, electronics and Boeing, and even giving them, Westinghouse nuclear reactors, so they can. And I wrote about this in 1997. I warned, because the deal Bush was under Clinton, but maybe it was later, a few years later under Bush, that we were negotiating the Westinghouse deal that would help them build all these nuclear reactors, which would give them enough, highly enriched uranium to build a massive nuclear arsenal. And what are they doing? Building a massive nuclear arsenal, which I warned against in 97. So that is, we're sometimes our own worst enemies.
Okay, I'm going to give you a final wrap up. Final thoughts.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on. Appreciate the monthly interviews, and there's a lot going on. Again, I think Trump's definitely increased his grade with me in the Middle East. He's gone from being a neocon to more on the America First side with this ceasefire deal, and he's pressured Israel the last few weeks to adhere to it. We'll see how he does. Obviously, Israel violated it, and probably will again sometime soon. But as long as Trump keeps going back to them and not giving up on a peace deal because Hamas won't disarm, he needs to actually come to some kind of compromise that Hamas will accept, but that will ensure that Hamas loses control. So I think that's positive. I was really bullish yesterday. I thought, okay, and I said in my posts on X, I said, okay, this is great what Trump said to Zelensky, but we haven't seen any follow up. So I was skeptical on the follow up, but immediately, he doubles down and reverses course. It seems like he talks to Putin, that he likes what Putin has to say. He tries to force Zelensky into peace, and he talks to Zelensky and says, "Screw Putin, we're going to do it your way." So I think the bottom line of what we've discussed today is Trump has a bipolar foreign policy, and it's really hurting the U.S. Security interests the cause of peace in the world. And I hope he fires his neocon advisors and gets rid of Rubio. He's got, Rubio's got two different jobs, Secretary of State and interim national security advisor. And he really needs to have an independent national security advisor who can steer him straight. Someone along the lines of J.D. Vance or, Tulsi Gabbard, I think would be ideal.
Well, David, tell people how they can reach you and get your Substack. Please tell them how they can interact with you, as well as on your X profile.
Yeah, so my X profile is at America First Con. That's CON. Not as in con as a con artist, but a con as conservative.
Conservative.
I just ran out of letters, so that I ran out of space when I wrote that up. So that's what I used for my my handle, Twitter handle, X handle in 2016 when I set that up. But also my newsletter is the Real War newsletter at dpyne.substack.com. Again, dpyne.substack.com. Again, I've got over 100 articles. They're not that brief. That's probably my greatest criticism is people, some people like that they're in depth and other people are like, well, they're too long to read. I can't focus on them. So I'm going to try to make them shorter, working on a shorter one that I'm going to publish this week. But that's where I publish my latest updates.
Well, David, I'm going to say thanks for your time. I'm going to ask you to hold on for just a minute, and I'll talk to you off air, as it were. But folks, this has been Talk with Jon here on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. Thank you for joining us. Share this link. Great conversation, great knowledge that was shared with you from David Pine, from Israel to Russia to China, and even a little Taiwan smattered in. Well worth listening to.